All right, Jake, we got part 2 of CM Punk and Kevin Owens going at it, kind of mid-show today. And we got a little bit more granular detail on why they don't like each other and a stronger, going back decades, although according to Kevin Owens, persistent since then, unwavering, and also said, alluded to a little more strongly a reference to the Young Bucks and Hangman Page in AEW being friends of KO, and who KO said he didn't treat well, Punk didn't treat well. But Punk said you might think it's, or KO said you might think it's only the 3 people that you're thinking of, without naming names, or even being any more specific. But he said it's really all my friends in this industry don't like you. They see you as performative and a fraud. I mean, part of me enjoyed it, and part of me was looking at the crowd, and I'm not sure they paid to watch CM Punk land punches on KO verbally like that, and KO land punches like at Punk like that, where they kind of painted each other, and you can keep score your own way. Painted each other as petty or phony. And if there was a novelty factor to this, Jake, it'd be like, oh wow, pro wrestling never does this, but that's all WWE does now. So I think the novelty is gone, and I don't really see the crowd popping. We'll talk about Cody too. He's holding a chair in the air. I got Randy, and the crowd's like, well, we kind of just want to chant Randy and chant for RKOs. There's just a lot of muddled ambivalence on crowd reactions right now, and WWE keeps doubling down. More of the same here, but there's still a lot to talk about in that promo. So kind of give me your takeaway.
Well, I thought Owens did a pretty nice job of, painting his picture, or at least his perception of CM Punk. And I guess the Punk's responses, I thought he got a little outclassed in a way. Like he didn't really have a good explanation for a lot of his past behavior. It was just, I was the top dog and I was doing top dog things, and that's kind of the best explanation that he could come up with. And so I guess it seemed to me like the crowd was maybe more shocked at Punk's reaction than to the actual accusations. Like you would typically expect somebody like Punk to have a pretty good explanation for himself and for his own behavior, and it just never came. It was a lot of evasion, and then just kind of deflecting, and then turning it back on various insults for Owens. And so I don't think Punk came across as particularly likable. I don't know that the intention was for him to be likable, but I came away from that segment perfectly I guess situated with, I think Kevin Owens is supposed to be the baby face here, even though you wouldn't necessarily know that based on the crowd reactions. It's been WWE just cannot decide who they want you to root for, and I think it's a core issue with a lot of their storytelling, particularly in their main event picture at this point.
Yeah, like I said, we can, people can keep score on this however they want, and I think there's going to be some people predisposed to Punk who give him more points in terms of coming across better or landing better verbal strikes and counter strikes. I'm with you. I mean, I thought KO was immensely more likable and spoke for himself more, but I think there is a level of whoever you're predisposed to be sympathetic to, I think there was room to take either side on this, but I think objectively KO was more likable, and I'm with you on Punk's responses. I want to hone in on, though, kind of what you said at the end there, and kind of what my opening was about, which is WWE. You said WWE can't decide who they want us to cheer, and I'm not sure if that's I'm not sure it's not, but I'm not sure it's the right question. I think they think there's value in not deciding who they want people to cheer. Like, I don't think it's that they can't decide. I think they have to think it's passé, right? I mean, they have to think that's not how we make money in 2026 at the top of the card is with the babyface heel construct anymore. There's just so much of it. And I mean, it's what I'm trying to figure out, and I certainly think it's negative. I mean, this week's Pro Wrestling Torch newsletter headline has WWE abandoned the face heel construct, and there's Kevin Owens and CM Punk on the cover. I talk about a lot more than Punk and Owens in the cover story this week, which is available for a paper copy subscription or a PDF or online version if you want to read my cover story this week with that VIP membership, PWTorch, VIPinfo.com. We'll give you full details on all the ways to sign up, PWTorch, VIPinfo.com. and I hold the news order up. One, it just gets a plug I'd get in 10 minutes over earlier. But mostly to show this is on my mind. Like this is something that is happening more and more often than it should. Sometimes it's better than others. But Jake, I don't think they can't decide who they want us to cheer. I think they don't think fans cheering for one wrestler over another is valuable to drawing money or interest. I think they are wrapped up in something I don't think I ever liked very much, going back to when it first started to be done, with Jeff Jarrett shooting on Hulk Hogan. I mean, there's all these examples, over the years that predate the pipe bomb promo. Or Vince Russo shooting on people, and I don't know. I just think play within the, color within the lines. There's so much art that fans appreciate when you tell a pro wrestling story that is within the lines of the playing field, which is just immensely compelling, full of opportunities. But the protagonist, antagonist, somebody who you like against somebody who you don't like, and then WWE amplifying those traits seems like the simple thing to do, and they're complicating it. There's the ambiguity that's leading to ambivalence. There's conflicted feelings, and I think fans are just kind of being like, I'm repeating myself because WWE's repeating this, but it's like watching mom and dad fight. It's just like, I don't want to be here for this. That's kind of how I think fans are kind of feeling about this. And you said, well, they're on KO's side. When Kevin Owens made his entrance, they cheered him, and then they started chanting CM Punk. Now, that was anticipation of Punk coming out, but it's not like they're like, we're so happy KO's back. We're kind of sick of Punk, so we're going to chant KO. Like, they're just cheering both guys because it's all a communal experience. It's all about show up at the arena and sing and chant. But in the end, I mean, I don't know. The announcers were kind of framing it like, well, KO's going to have a hometown advantage in Toronto. It's like, well, he kind of sort of had a hometown advantage in Boston too. But by the end, I just didn't think fans were all that comfortable with what they were watching and hearing, even if they were, sort of keeping score. And I think most would be siding with KO. So that's a lot, Jake. Go ahead and respond to any of it.
Yeah, I don't know whether the abandonment of the face heel dynamic is something that they're trying to import from UFC, like where maybe there's some thought pattern that what's worked well for UFC is just presenting these two people like they're just two personalities, and the fans are going to make a decision about whether or not they like or hate them, and we don't necessarily care which one the fans choose because either way we win. Yep. And I don't know if that's something that is being pushed down onto the booking team in WWE, or if that's something that they've been convinced of, or perhaps
it predates TKO owning WWE in a way, but it is more immersive, more plentiful, more dominating of the top men and women, especially men's storylines right now. I mean, George St. Pierre, Randy Couture. I mean, there were top baby faces. You had Michael Bisping. You had the outside invader, Brock Lesnar from pro wrestling. They did heel face matchups before, and they drew big money with those things. And, in UFC, fighters tried to figure out over the decades, am I a good guy or a bad guy in a way? Like, how do I get people talking about me, and how do I get buy rates up when buy rates used to be, the key to whether you were considered a star or not, along with whether you won your fights. And people searched for the personas, and they looked, am I more of an antagonist or protagonist? And Bisping's like, I'm going to be heel. This is going to be great. And Randy Couture is just naturally a babyface. George St. Pierre couldn't be anything but what he was. Brock Lesnar, villain. I mean, so I don't think they're learning the right lessons even from UFC. And also, you're probably heading there, but there's differences between UFC and pro wrestling as a weekly TV series with the same people every week interacting with a variety of opponents in a soap opera pseudo sport versus you fight once a year, once every 17 months, whatever the average is, and you have to sell a fight on the reality of these two people hate each other, but you don't have that consistent babyface at the top or the consistent heel at the top like pro wrestling does. The formula is just, it might look the same to somebody who watches occasionally, but it's not.
Well, and I guess WWE is a fictional program. It has some luxuries that the UFC doesn't, in the sense that they can do character studies that evolve over the course of weeks and months and transform people and take you on a journey. I think successful television shows are almost required to do that if you want people to stick around from season to season. And I don't know that's necessarily the reason for what we're seeing now, but it almost comes across as sort of like the TKO influence that I already mentioned, and some of the social media, influencer era, like everybody is a brand and you have to promote everybody as a brand, and whether or not they're a villain or a hero is sort of beside the point of whether or not they're successful and they get attention and they get likes and they get views and they get subscriptions and all those other things. And I don't know if it's like some sort of fusion of the two philosophies where it's just become like, well, maybe this isn't as important anymore because it's really just about what gets eyes on the product, and we don't have to so much focus on, being a good television show, because that's really what it feels like sometimes, where it's like, well, we can abandon the pretense that we're a fictional sport that and we're taking you on a journey and trying to convince you that certain people are villains and certain people are heroes, where we just don't care. Are you buying the t-shirts? Are you cheering in the arenas? Are you buying the tickets? Well, we'll just give you what you want, and we don't really care what that is anymore. And there doesn't seem to be an underlying philosophical choice being made about how they tell stories on television. They're just trying to keep their ear to the ground and focus on what people are responding to, and they just give them more or less of that depending on what they feel is working at any given moment.
Ear to the ground on what's working. If they're ear to the ground on what's working, if they had their ear to the ground to assess what's working, this isn't working. I mean, crowds aren't responding. They're not responding to this. Cody didn't get cheered after, because they love Randy. The crowd chanted for Punk, and then they were kind of with KO, and then they were just sort of like listening. When people responded, it was when Otis stood up to Austin Theory, and that's like lower card, or mid card comedy stuff. They're reacting to the face heel dynamic. If you got your ear to the ground, you're looking to have established clear cut heels and faces right now at the top of the card where the money is drawn. I mean, I would think they would be assessing why was SummerSlam humiliating in terms of our attendance compared to the year before and in the other stadium shows we've done. Yeah.
They want the money though. Like they look at the metrics of, oh, are we making more money than we were last quarter? Or and I don't know how they interpret those signals and how it affects the TV product. You may be right that SummerSlam may be something that causes them to reevaluate how they're doing television and how they're presenting stories, but I don't know if they're going to learn the right lessons from it, because they don't seem to be getting those signals and turning that into more enjoyable television for the most part. I mean, they did switch things up. I mean, we have some fresh matchups post SummerSlam that I think are more entertaining in a general sense than what we were getting pre SummerSlam. But it doesn't seem like they picked up the narrative lesson that, hey, part of the reason this show failed is because you didn't deliver interesting stories and the show cost a fortune. And I've heard nobody in WWE acknowledge that fact whatsoever so far. So I have no idea what metrics they're most focused on at this point. It's kind of guesswork from my perspective.
Yeah. It's fascinating to watch for me. But I think crowds who are paying money now to go and be part of the experience of being at a WWE show, some of them they're not going to even think that hard about it. They're just going to be like, I didn't get out of it what I wanted. I don't know. To me, the crowd reaction, you can say the metrics, but the metrics were baked in when the deals were signed. I mean, the metric that counts is, are you selling tickets? And the second metric that counts is, are the people who bought tickets responding with passion, or do they seem to be having a good time? And if you're assessing a good time based on communal chants and sing-alongs, it's sort of like the dueling chants for John Cena. Hey, at least they're reacting. Well, right, but 70% of the crowd's reacting the opposite way that his character is being presented on TV, which shows you don't actually understand your own fan base in your booking against a headwind. And now they're getting communal chants, sure, but that's a far secondary option to Cody on his journey, Sammy in Montreal, the go-to examples, Rhea Ripley on her rise.
Is this the outcome of them learning the wrong lesson from 15 years of John Cena getting dueling reactions and them thinking that was a positive thing? Like, I don't know if that's what everybody learned from that, but the way that you hear them talk about it when they're doing retrospectives and video packages and all those things is like, oh, John Cena carried this company during a very tough period. And, he didn't care whether he was getting booed or cheered. He thought of it all as investment, right? Like the fans were invested in me and my story, even if they loved or hated me. And I think they apply that to seemingly everyone now. Like it doesn't matter whether you're a villain or whether you're a hero. You as long as you're getting a reaction, that's better than apathy. But then you watch, tonight's show, and there were a lot of people who seemed kind of baffled and apathetic about what they were watching at times.
Yeah. And I don't buy for a second John Cena's like, yay, 70% of the crowd's booing me despite my best efforts to get everyone to cheer me. It was humiliating, but they framed it as a positive because it certainly was better than no crowd response. But Hulk Hogan getting cheered against Paul Orndorff in front of sold-out crowds was better. It's day. I mean, having crowds rally enthusiastically like it's overtime in Game 7 and you're the home team in the NHL Stanley Cup Finals. That's the peak fan experience, and WWE's not even aiming for that now. Some of it can be the circumstances they find themselves in. They are paying a price for not developing strong enough heels to feel like they can make money with heels against baby faces. And also, I think they're in the business of selling merchandise, and I think wrestlers in powerful positions don't want to turn heel because they don't want to risk their merch money in their final stretch of time because the merch money is so good. And so I think and then I think there's disingenuousness. I think there's people who want to protect their merch money. They don't say that, so they make the case that what we should do is go shoot on each other, or pseudo shoot, because these aren't shoots. I mean, people, it's the new work. They're making marks out of fans in a different way. And they take great joy in it. Terry Taylor would always say back in the day, in the early 90s, when the newsletters were big and fans would show up at WCW pay-per-views and be like, you're all still marks, right? Just because it's not real, you're just a different kind of mark than the people that you look down on. And that's part of my distaste for this is they're not really shooting on each other, but fans are taking joy in feeling like they're being honored by having the fourth wall broken constantly for them, but they're getting an inferior story. And they're part of crowds that are ambivalent and conflicted. And that's not a fun building to be in my opinion. So I'm against it if it's not clear. I think it's bad for business. I don't think the metrics support it. I don't think it makes just common sense. And I think it's trying to create something new that doesn't need a new formula to work. And I feel stronger about it now than I did a week ago and more than I did 3 weeks ago as I continue to watch Cody Rhodes go out there and he wants that face heel dynamic, and WWE's celebrating or failing to condemn Randy Orton ruining a title match at SummerSlam. And hey, it was a moment. It's all about moments, Jake. That's what it's about. It's about moments. It's not about telling a story of the integrity of a title on the line and finding out who the better wrestler is. That's silly. No, it's about moments, and you got a moment with Randy. And now they didn't heavily advertise Cody Sammy, so it's in that sense, it wasn't like they took something away that fans spent hours or days or weeks anticipating. But still, it was like, you got a moment. It was wild. They brawled in the crowd. It's like, yeah, but we didn't get a match. So
you get some likes, though. That's what's important.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's pause, introduce ourselves, and I'll throw some comments up from the chat. A lot of spirited conversation there, and then we'll go from there. This is the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Post Show for Friday, August 14th, 2026. I'm Wade Keller, host of the show, editor, publisher, and founder of the Pro Wrestling Torch weekly newsletter. Held up the latest copy a moment ago. And also the website, PWTorch.com, which features my live detailed reports with analysis of Raw, Dynamite, and SmackDown every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, along with PLEs and pay-per-views, along with breaking news, a wide array of voices writing commentaries and articles in familiar and popular formats like Hits and Misses, Rising and Fading Stars, and our Feud Tracker, and more. Check it out every day. PWTorch.com. Add it to your stops. Create a tab, create a bookmark, leave that page open, and hit refresh and see what we got for you, because I think there's some good writing that will be a nice break from social media scrolling, a bunch of randos trolling you, and AI bots creating a false world of shallow thoughts and trolling. We are here to talk SmackDown tonight, and Jake Barnett from ProWrestling.net is my co-host. It's great to be on a show with Jake. Last time it didn't work out because I was out that night. I think I was going to a concert last time you co-hosted. But it's good to be able to talk wrestling with you again. It's been a while.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Wade. Always a pleasure.
Jake, tell people where they can find your writing, your reporting, and your commentary in written and podcast form.
Yeah, you can find everything I do at prowrestling.net, and you can check out our membership at pwmembership.net. I'm doing a weekly live coverage of AEW Dynamite, typically, sometimes WWE Smackdown, as I did tonight when I was jumping on with Wade here. But I'm also a part of a number of different podcasts. One with Jason Powell. It's a .net weekly show. It's our membership exclusive flagship audio show, and I also join him for pay-per-view audio reviews, as well as any reviews of the shows that I cover for the site, so Dynamite or Smackdown or whatever you'd like. So that whole stream is available at pwmembership.net. I recommend you check it out.
Awesome. I do too. All right. If you want to be part of the show and you're watching us live on our YouTube channel, join the chat. You can also email us, wadekellerpostshow@gmail.com. If you prefer that method of communicating with us, we'll read your email on the air. wadekellerpostshow@gmail.com. Wade Keller podcast@gmail.com is the email to use for our weekly flagship. Jason Paul joined me this Tuesday. We did 2 hours for free, another hour VIP exclusive, and read some emails on the air and responded to them and added to the show. So you consider yourself invited to be part of next week's flagship. I believe Zach Hadorn will be my co-host next Tuesday, if all works out as planned. So start sending your questions in for the flagship anytime. That'll be, again, recorded next Tuesday. So get them in, ideally by Monday night. You can also call us. There's a link to be a caller in my TV report at PWTorch, the website. Just go to the SmackDown report that I wrote and look for the link to be a caller. That link changes every time. So every show it's different. And we'd love to have your voice or your voice and face on the show with us. If you're listening to us on the podcast side of thing, which is most of you through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or a bunch of Android and iOS apps, or streaming directly from our website, welcome. Thank you. You're invited to join us live on YouTube if it works out for your schedule. Just look for the link in my TV report, or just go to YouTube and search PWTorch or Wade Keller. You'll find the show. We go live 5 or 10 minutes after the shows, and Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We also have a live NXT post show, and we do live post PLE shows too, with different hosts and co-hosts. What was I going to add to that? I don't know if I need to add anything to that. So let's get on with our conversation here. Going away from my philosophical bewilderment that they continue to think this is a good idea, I made that clear. I don't know that I need to underline more my stance on it, but for what they are doing and what they have chosen to do, I do want to delve a little bit more into what KO and Punk chose to talk about, and a little bit more what you talked about in your first response in the A block, Jake, which is how Punk's responses seemed to validate, verify, back up, almost create sort of a living image of why people don't like Punk. KO says, you're performative, you're phony, you have a reputation for yelling and screaming at people backstage. And I mean, he did that to Ryan Nemeth and AEW a few years back. It's just, he berated this poor guy who was just a lower card guy. And people like, dude, Punk, settle down. Like, I know you're mad at his social media posts, saying I'm with the Bucks. And he's like, I just thought it was storyline. I was just taking sides, and Punk flipped out on him. And people were very uncomfortable in that locker room. Punk was just red-faced and in his face. And I had eyewitness reports on it detailed, and it was just, very much in line with things that we saw with Punk on camera with the AEW post-show press conferences. And so now Punk, who has shed that image, he's been a model employee. He's been healthy and eager to help out the company. He's been a company guy. He has delivered as best to his physical ability at his age with his opponents and all those things working against him in certain ways. No one's going to accuse him of not trying hard to achieve closest to greatness he can in the ring now. And he has, WrestleMania was amazing. And on the microphone, even if I don't like the framework or the intent, the delivery's been really strong. But then you have a segment now that, some people in the chat, like, I loved it. Well, why? Why do you want fake shooting it's patronizing you by pretending they're being real when they're not, when you could have something within the playing field that just makes more sense and is more compelling? And now you have a segment where they're bringing stuff up that Punk was trying to get away from, at least in theory, when he got to WWE. And now I think he's won some people over who were down on him in AEW because they're like, oh, maybe it was AEW's fault. He hasn't had trouble really follow him in WWE. Maybe it was the Bucks. Maybe it was the environment. Maybe as he said, although I would advise against it, people who are against me are just mediocre people. Sometimes people have a point, and it's not just mediocrity, that causes them to resent you. But now they're bringing this all up again, and I mean, I don't think it's like a huge thing that's gonna, in and of itself, bringing it up. But I also and I know KO's friends with the Bucks, and there's a history there with KO and Punk, and they can't resist. But to me, the more compelling story to tell that doesn't drudge up this stuff from a few years back in AEW, that was very polarizing, that Punk has spent years kind of cleansing himself of. I'd rather have them talk about their WWE history. And having Punk tell Kevin Owens, well, you wouldn't have gotten those chances if I was around, is a little meta. And I'd rather have Punk say, the reason you won a world title was because you didn't have to go through me to get number one contendership. I wish they stayed more in storyline. I think they can use their personalities and their wit and their just art of promos and speaking ability to take material within the playing field of Raw and SmackDown and pay-per-views and use their skills for that instead of this tired hack, derivative, played-out crutch of pseudo shoots. And I think they could be doing great work without doing that. And I think now they're drudging up stuff I don't think people wanted to think about with Punk. Jake.
Yeah, I found what Punk didn't say more interesting than what he said, because there wasn't really an attempt, like when Kevin said that you came back as a last resort, like you're only here because you imploded somewhere else and you had no other choice. And he really never addressed that. And he also made really no attempt to employ empathy at any point in the promo. He said he evolved, and I strive to be 1% better than I am the day before, but there was never really any detail involved. Did you improve because it suited your interests, or are you just a textbook narcissist and it blew up on you, and so you knew you had to reform yourself because otherwise you weren't going to have a career and you weren't going to have you weren't going to be able to continue the lifestyle that you were enjoying and all those other things. And so I came away from the promo thinking, well, Punk is avoiding saying the truth because it really would probably come across as self-serving and somewhat narcissistic to say that, well, yeah, everybody who's against me is a loser, and that's why I am where I am in life, is because I've just made the choice that I'm always right and everybody else is always wrong, and I'm just this condescending asshole because that's who I am, and nobody has ever had a valid point as to how I could have done something differently or better. It's just I strive to be better because that's what suits my personal interests. So my takeaway from this promo was that there really isn't a good explanation for Punk's behavior, and he hasn't really put a lot of thought into it. And he's arrived where he is because he's marketable, and that's always boded well for his career. But he never apologized to Owens for what he had said to him in the locker room 20 years ago. He just vaguely alluded to Owens speaking disrespectfully to him, as if that justified berating him like a maniac in front of a locker room full of people. And that was kind of where it ended up. Like I came away from it thinking this guy may actually be a sociopath. I have no idea if he's even capable of recognizing when his own behavior crosses the line. And that's kind of always been the edge with Punk. Like, you're really not sure. Yeah. It's like, is he really lacking in self-awareness? Is it always a gimmick? Is he always working? Or these people that he's in conflict with, genuinely at fault at times? Or is it just because he's so abrasive that people just eventually get pushed into, snapping on him? And so I don't know. I continue to think of Punk as a bit of an enigma. I don't know whether he's a sociopath or whether he's just learned how to massage his personality into something marketable enough to continue to have a wrestling career. Because he doesn't seem like he's particularly a lot of fun to be around when you hear the stories about when he, like you said, with Nemeth and others, where he just can't seem to contain his anger at times.
I'm in alignment with Punk on wrestling philosophy in most ways when I've heard him spoke about what wrestling should be, or what is wrong with wrestling, or what can be a spark to wrestling. In most ways, not every way, and I think when he's right, and I've said this a lot in so many words, he can be right, but by the end of rubbing in how right he is, you resent him for it enough that you take the opposing view, or you just don't want to be around him. Like, you can be on his side, but resent his emphatic defense that makes people feel small and incompetent and pathetic who didn't see it at the same time he did, the way that he saw it. And that is off-putting to people. And it causes some people to be attracted to him who are followers of him or are attracted to that. But a lot of people who are just kind of a little more nice, easygoing, just are like, I don't want to be around that energy. And then other alphas are like, they want to go after him, so he's a complex figure for sure. But his response, being hated by losers is the price I pay for not being one of them. I mean, it's a line. And if you're a Punk fan, you're in there with cheers in the crowd. That's the Punk brand. If you're with me, you're not a loser because you see what a winner I am. But that's, it's a dated reference now, but the great Duke basketball player, Final Four hero, Christian Laettner, was asked once in the locker room, why aren't the Wolves going to make the playoffs? Whatever the setup question was, why are you guys losing? And he just sat in the locker room. The story goes, it's been told on record many times, and he pointed at his teammates one at a time and went, loser, 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 winner. I can't do it all. I mean, I'm only slightly paraphrasing the context. Yeah. Laettner had that CM Punk reputation in basketball too, of the way he came across. Is the defense mechanism is to say, if you're against me, you're a loser. And that did come to light here. And he has been, I don't want to say, I mean, obviously he's been in feuds where the promos have all been about tearing Punk down, but Kevin Owens is a particularly effective counter to Punk's brand, because he is Punk's brand, but with the line that KO used. And I think it's a shoot. And I think it's what Kevin Owens thinks is, when I go home, I look in the mirror, I look around my house, look at my family, my life. I'm a happy guy. I'm happy with who I am. And Punk, I don't think you've looked in the mirror and been happy with yourself genuinely a day of your life. I mean, that's, it takes you to a place as a fan that I just don't think people tune into wrestling to see, because I genuinely think, I've said this since I went to SummerSlam, I'm looking around at that crowd, those fans that I was sitting, the majority, I mean, there's a few guys, in the crowd who are like, yeah, this is great. I love it because I know the story. They're talking to me now and they're breaking the fourth wall, and that's what I watch wrestling for. But most of them, this is not what they're looking for. They're not on social media right now talking about it, but this kind of segment is not what they're looking for. They want to cheer Otis sticking it to Maxine and Austin Theory. They want to see Sammy achieve his dream. They want Cody to finish his story. They want to see Rhea Ripley succeed in the face of arrogant blondes who have had everything handed to them, and she's this genuine person who's had to fight to be recognized. Those are the stories that you tell that inspire everyday people who are going to WWE, and instead they're playing to this micro audience of people who are the loudest on social media, who just want to be catered to with this patronizing fake shoot stuff that turns them into the new version of Marks. And WWE is so obsessed with that right now, Jake.
Yeah, I guess they are obsessed with it. I mean, going viral and getting the likes and the subscriptions and the retweets or whatever you want to call it. It is certainly a major part of their online presence. And I think KO is a particularly effective counter to Punk. We all, during the pandemic, I think it seemed like there was a lot of people who watched that Michael Jordan documentary, The Last Dance, that centered around the Bulls. And I think the takeaway from that is that, well, to get to that level and to be Michael Jordan, there's like a sprinkle of mental illness that goes along with it, right? And that's my takeaway from Punk a lot of the time, is like there's greatness in CM Punk, but you also have to accept that he's kind of a nut job sometimes. And I think that's reflected here, where you have Kevin Owens, who, seemingly and away from the ring, very well liked, has that everyman quality that people can aspire to. And you have Punk, who sees that as a weakness,
or he's jealous of it and he doesn't understand why he can't have it too. I think it could be that too.
That's entirely possible. I don't know if they're going to dig into that aspect of it with this program, But the way that he phrased his responses to Owens is that he's never had that drive to go to the next level.
Yep.
And he's never had that itch. And to me, that's like MJ, who had to take things personally to put himself in a headspace to go out there and be like, this other guy I'm facing, I hate that guy. Like, I have to convince myself that I hate him, even though maybe I am jealous of him, or maybe there are qualities about him that I admire, but I absolutely hate that guy. And that's who I think, that's the kind of headspace that I think Punk is in a lot of the time, or at least that he comes across as in character on television. But I do think that Owens works well as a foil for him because he's found a similar amount of success while, still employing empathy and being relatable to other human beings.
Yeah. Yep. Well put. Some chat comments here. Vinny Guakin says, performative is a perfect word to describe Punk. I'll read another comment here. And then I'll frame, I think, what KO was getting at. Crofton says, when I hear performative, I think John Cena. And to a lesser degree, Cody. Punk, like him or hate him, he comes off as himself. I think what Kevin Owens is getting at is Punk is editing himself when he acts like a good employee who's smiling and getting along with everybody. The Roman and the Usos got into this too. Roman's like, when the cameras are on, you're a good soldier, but you're, insufferable when the cameras aren't on and you're not performing for the boss or social media clips. Roman introduced that notion that Punk is a phony when it comes to how happy he is, but reports are like, there's with exceptions, and the thing is he's the kind of guy you don't know until he walks in the room what kind of afternoon it's going to be. They're like, Punk's here. Well, we'll find out what the mood's going to be based on the spring in his step or his facial expression and what he's bringing with him that day. But he isn't doing what he did in AEW to just be disruptive. He can't help the moodiness that Roman was calling out in that way. I'm going to pull something that will sound believable, and there's some truth to it, so it's kind of fun to bring up. And so when Kevin said Punk is being performative, it's a caricature and an exaggeration, but it is rooted in, I think, something that follows Punk everywhere, which is if you are being professional, it's the veneer that you think you have to put on in order to get to the next part of what you want to do that day, or get what you want out of management, or to just be a good soldier, even though you're having to grit your teeth to get through all the incompetence that you see around you that drives you nuts. And so I think that's kind of what he was getting at. But when Crofton says what I think of as performative isn't Punk, I see that as genuine, and Punk is genuine. I do think this promo, Jake, and you've hit it multiple times and really well in talking about this was a genuine Punk. These are his defense mechanism is to say, if somebody doesn't like me, it doesn't mean I'm going to be introspective or self-deprecating or admit I have bad days. It's going to be, well, they're losers. And the price I pay for not being a loser is being hated by losers. And that's it. That's the defense mechanism. And so that is genuinely who Punk is. But I think KO is super smart. He sees Punk for who he is, and it drives him nuts. And I think, I sit here and I say, I don't think WWE should be doing this segment. It's selfless for me to say that because I love to talk about these segments. I think they're great podcast material. Psychoanalyzing Punk and Kevin Owens in this dynamic is good. It's good to talk about, a lot more than Tiffany. So it's good for my job, but I don't think WWE. I don't think it's good for the fan experience or the larger fan base of WWE. But the line late in the promo saying, "Does it bother you that I never sought out your advice or guidance?" is interesting too, because it plays into the notion of KO doesn't see himself as an underling of Punk, even though Punk was a big fish in a small pond when Kevin arrived. Because that's like when you're in fourth grade, you think sixth graders are like way ahead of you. That's the future. But when you're 42, you don't look at a 44-year-old and go, "Oh my God, when I'm 44, I'm going to know so much more and have so much power and whatever." Like, yes, Kevin Owens is younger and he got it, but it's not like there's no difference there anymore.
I think that line was particularly in service of the idea that Owens never saw Punk as somebody worth emulating. That he just, he never identified Punk as somebody that he wanted to be like, and so he never sought out his advice or counsel or whatever. And I think that's effective in saying, well, I sniffed you out early on. That you're not somebody worth following. But I guess in relation to the comment you just had up regarding Cena and Rhodes as being like what was the word that was used there?
Performative. When Crofton said when I hear performative, I think of John Cena and lesser degree Cody. Punk though, comes off as himself.
I don't think Punk has a sincerity issue necessarily. He comes across as himself, and sometimes that's not great. And because there are some qualities about Punk that rub people the wrong way. With Rhodes and Cena, I don't know if it's so much performative as they both have this quality where it's like, I'm an alien who's still kind of figuring out how to disguise myself as a human being for a day.
Yep.
And where they just have this like lack of self-awareness where you're just like, are you for real? And I don't know if that's necessarily performative, but it is something that I identify as being a commonality between the two of them. They come across as unrelatable at times.
Yeah, but trying very hard. Yeah, there's a self-consciousness that there was a self-conscious. I mean, no, that's a whole other time. I think Cena at first was comfortable, in the early years, kind of having this edge, youthful edge to him, and then it turned into this kind of awkwardness as he outgrew the age when he should be doing that, and then he gained power and influence and ego and had people fawning over him, and then he just stopped being introspective and lives in not quite the La La Land that Dwayne Johnson does, but he lives in La La Land, and everyone just walks on eggshells around him, and none of his quirks are checked anymore. Cody's in a different spot, and that's a whole other thing, but there is definitely on air a sense of, what do I have to do to be popular? Because look at my dad and the connection he had with the fans, and look at some of these other wrestlers who are on top. And I do think there is a sense of inferiority or imposter complex or something that he has. It's like I'm a top guy, but I don't feel like I'm a top guy, but I need to be a top guy. Like you see the little internal struggle kind of manifesting in some of what he's doing. And even when he's, yelling at Sammy, you see him thinking about what he's doing instead of just doing it. With Punk, you just see him doing it. And I think that's where the authenticity thing comes in, that you're talking about for sure. Another comment here from Derek Mitchell. As much as Punk fancies himself as self-confident and self-assured, he's very thin-skinned and ultra-sensitive. I think in a self-aware, honest CM Punk would admit that that's certainly his track record. Mark Biscotti says, as far as Cody goes, I still see the same Cody, just pouring a little perfume on the pig that is his babyface act. I think he could sell way more. I think he could sell way more for the company if they made a real change. It doesn't mean heel. Not sure exactly what that means. Vinny Guakin says, I also like KO calling out Punk. Punk came back to WWE as a last resort. Punk, you mentioned that, Jake. Punk's stubbornness and hypocrisy is what brought Punk back to the place he insulted for 9 years. Punk's character works best, and it flails a bit when it isn't there, when there's a clear-cut authority figure for him to push back against and call out for hypocrisy or corruption or incompetence. When he aims that at people who don't carry the traits that Vince McMahon did when he was pushing back against the machine and the corporate wrestling, but now he's become that. It's harder. It's harder for it to land.
Yeah, there's definitely that aspect of Punk's character where he needs a force. He's like pushing the rock up the hill for eternity, and if it wasn't there, he'd just be standing around wondering what he should be doing. And he now that he's world champion and he has become a company guy, it is basically the opposite of what he portrayed himself as during his last run of the company, where he was constantly fighting a system that was slanted against him, and he had this philosophical vision for the future of professional wrestling that was at odds with what Vince McMahon had wanted WWE to be, and he didn't fit the image of what a champion should be. And now that he's left without that pushback against him, he has to seek out new enemies to aim that same anger and vitriol at. And oftentimes it comes across like it did tonight, where you're just like, what are you angry about in this scenario? Like, what and why do you feel superior to Kevin Owens? And why do you think it necessary to condescend to him in this way on this subject matter when he's making good points and you've done nothing but deflect and defer and all those things? And so I do think that Punk is in a weird place as a result of his choice to adopt the company guy image and try to still hold on to some of those rebellious roots. I think it's kind of a strange juxtaposition, especially when you get him opposite people like Kevin Owens, who have, at least from the outside looking in, been fairly consistent over the years in terms of their approach to pro wrestling and how they carry themselves outside the ring. So it'd be an interesting. I mean, Punk's just an interesting character study in general, but these moments kind of highlight why that's the case.
It'd be interesting to put a series of Punk promos opposite of Drew and Roman and now Kevin Owens, and pick others if you want, in front of like a psychology graduate class of non-wrestling fans, and just have them watch like 3 straight days of this kind of thing in class, and then analyze what they see. Because I'd like to see without the well, because if like, and part of what's sparking this is Crofton made the comment. Let me pull this up. Yeah, so Crofton says, I find the conversations about Punk on the podcast interesting because hosts talk about him as a person and not a scripted character. Is it a work shoot? If so, he's playing a character. So if you took that away of people watching, just what would they analyze this is, thinking either it's entirely scripted or it's not scripted? That really wouldn't matter. Just what would their impression be of what he's presenting on the screen without, well, he's the guy who stood up to Vince McMahon and cut the pipe bomb promo and had 5-star matches and started off in ROH and then went away in protest and was a man of his word until things changed. And then he, like, if you take all that away, there's baggage, and then there's like reasons that fans just revere him, and you just analyze the end product of his promos. I'd be interested in what people trained in psychology, studying human behavior, would say, and I think they would, look at Punk saying, when I look at KO, I see a version of myself 20 years ago who's stubborn and loud and thinks he's always the smartest guy in the room. And I think the classroom full of graduate students in their 20s would be like, that's projection. That's all I see when I watch Punk. I think that they would see through that or categorize it as that. Derek Mitchell says Punk is just exhausting to watch. Someone else mentioned projection. Oh, yeah, Vinny Guakin says Punk did major projection to KO in this promo. That's what I was thinking watching it, yeah. Vinny Guakin says Punk is full of crap, if we're being honest, and calling people losers. Hyde said he thinks he's smarter than everyone. Safik says Punk's mediocre people line sounded like every D-bag rich person. Yeah, I mean, there's something there. Let me... Standard Deviation had a point here I want to bring up. When the crowd was quiet during KO's promo, I think Punk saved himself by looking away and fidgeting to give Kevin an out to break his rhythm and go off at Punk for not looking at him. Punk's a pro. So Punk is a pro. This is a performance to Crofton's comment. It is a worked shoot, but it's an interesting point that Crofton says, like, you guys are talking about it like this isn't a scripted, bullet pointed thing. If it's a worked shoot, then Punk's playing a character, but it's a work shoot, but KO and Punk aren't playing characters. They're playing an embellished version of their authentic selves, because the Kevin Owens brand and the Punk brand is authenticity and quick wit, acerbic wit. So that's who they are. So fans like KO and Punk because they think they know who they are. And in fact, all evidence that's out there outside of a promotional promo that's scripted and meant to sell tickets matches what we saw tonight with them, Jake, right? I mean, it's a worked shoot, but the characters are based on reality, and that reality there's plenty of evidence that, this is 85% them.
I would think so. Yeah, they both play characters that are, some portion of their personality turned up to 11. And it's not the entire person, like it is a character. It's very difficult to capture the nuance of an entire human being in a pro wrestling character. But I think people have kind of come to realize that the version of Kevin Owens and the version of Punk you see on the screen is at least a reasonable facsimile of who they are off screen, just kind of turned way up. And obviously you can play heel, you can play babyface, but you can't lose you can't completely sever the connection between the man and the on-screen. performer. But I think it plays well here, and it becomes an interesting study because they're similar in a lot of ways, but they're different in very key ways that they were trying to really point out tonight on this show. And whether it's a successful way to build to a main event on next week's SmackDown, I guess is kind of what the debate is here. Is it like is this the way to sell tickets for next week's SmackDown to try to fill the building? I don't necessarily know the answer to that, but if you're just, it's interesting for us to talk about because we've been talking about both of these guys for 20 years or close to it, right? Yeah. Because that's how long they've both been, on television to some extent. But I think it's also, interesting in the sense that, well, how much is this going to impact how people perceive both of these guys going forward? Because fans have longer memories than WWE likes to believe they do. And if they tear each other down effectively enough, does it alter their ability to be likable in the future if they move on to their next feud or the next story? I think it is interesting that this is a match they're giving away on SmackDown next week. I very much would have thought it would have been a pay-per-view match.
Yeah. Yep. Interesting comment from Vinny Guakin. Punk is like the nerd that ditches his friends once the popular kids let him hang out at the cool kids table. Interesting.
I think it's there's a lot of, and maybe this is part of the evolution of Punk that he was talking about, but I think it's maybe impossible not to have to an extent. But as somebody reaches a level of success and a level of wealth that Punk has, and a level of I guess just notoriety and public recognition, you tend to kind of shrink the bubble that you live in, and you become a little bit less relatable to other people. And you were talking about it earlier with Roman Reigns and maybe to an even larger extent Dwayne Johnson, where like you appear like an alien to the outside world because you've disconnected yourself from the wider culture to a point where you become somewhat unrecognizable in comparison to who you were 10, 20, however many years earlier.
And part of it is just people stop being honest with you because they want something from you, or you've given off the vibe that you could, like, it's like KO said in this promo, I didn't punch you 20 years ago because you would have ended my career on the spot. I mean, you had, in that context, you had the power to put in a bad word for the nobody me who was wearing a t-shirt with a gut, who you 20 years later are going to say, I didn't try to improve myself 1% every year. And by the way, a little projection, because, I mean, trust me, the Paul Levesques of the world looked at CM Punk and said, the guy can't hit the gym. Where do you think skinny fat came from? I mean, Punk didn't look like a gym rat. Now, Punk could go, well, I just didn't take steroids. Well, there's a way to look more fit than he did at times, minus steroids. And, certainly that's, the guys who got up early and went to the gym judged Punk for that. He has a natural thin frame. I mean, it's just Shelton Benjamin might go to the gym less than Punk to look the way he does most of the time. I mean, some people just sort of have a different kind of build. And I intentionally didn't pick someone who people see as, just super, super muscular, Braun Strowman, but some people just are. That said, Punk is throwing something at KO that was thrown at him. And that plays maybe into the projection thing a little bit too. Piled River Pete says, money changes everything. Vinny Guakin says, Punk lacks the self-awareness to realize he was disrespectful to the vets like Undertaker and Triple H. Rude Dog says, Kevin Owens doesn't drink beer either, by the way, so you can't call it a beer gut, though it is a gut. Vinny says, yeah, Punk saying he sees himself from 20 years ago in KO, that was a projection to me because Punk still shows those traits from 20 years ago. Yeah, there you go. Super chat from Derek. Thank you, Derek, so much. Super chat's always invited. Punk mocked Cena years ago about Cena turning into the Yankees and not the Red Sox. Ironically, Punk merchandise mimics Cena style tonight. It was Boston Red Sox blue and red. Oh, wow. Interesting, yeah. Thanks, Derek. Nashville Diaz says, when you watch Punk attempt to do anything that isn't wrestling, you see how just unathletic he is. JC Scooby says Punk and KO talk backstage get the gist of what they were going to say in the ring. Don't be fooled. Let's be clear. This goes back to what Brian Gewirtz validated in his book that I had been reporting for years about Cena and Rock, which is they said, go say what you want, because they both had pride and a belief in themselves that whatever Cena says, Rock thinks, I got this. And Rock says whatever Cena says, or Cena says whatever Rock says, I got this. And we see in WWE Unreal, like Punk thought it was a good idea to try to imitate John Cena, apparently. in what I thought was humiliating and debasing and just like he died out there, but Punk didn't know he was gonna. And if you go back to Punk and excuse me, if you go back to Rock and Cena, Rock was arrogant and thought, I'm The Rock. Who's this guy? And then Rock did his thing, and we're like, whoa, Cena's toast. And the next week, Cena just tore him to pieces. It was game over. They called it. The ref would have stopped the fight, but they kept going back and forth. Cena brought it. He was ready. There's a little bit of that here. A little bit. I think less than that, because I think them going at each other, and this is why I say it's a new work, is based on things that they don't feel as strongly about towards each other as they used to. But I still think there's this. It's more than a guess, but I don't have certitude. I think that they still have some of these feelings that I was right before, but I'm more mature and gentlemanly now, and we'll let that go. And now they're pretending they never let it go. But it's based on truth. But of course they're talking through what they're going to say. But neither guy's going to go, oh, don't go there about my gut, or don't go there about, like Punk doesn't want to say, oh, that's too far. And KO knows that, so we can say almost anything. And KO's not going to go, oh, Punk, don't bring that up, because that gives Punk a win behind the scenes. And I do think they both have a legit pride in being great talkers who have thick skin and more material to work with. And so we get stuff like this. But of course, they put on a veneer of getting along. And by the way, that's the business. That's the business they're in. People who don't like each other have matches where they're professional. They don't actually hurt each other, even though they could. You put yourself in the arms of sometimes your enemies, who you won't trust alone with your girlfriend, but you trust each other in the ring. That's just the code. You don't get anywhere in this. You're done if you can't be trusted in the ring. And so there is an element of that works its way to promos too. Jake, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think it's, they clearly have a structure in mind for these promos. I mean, obviously they have the ability to improvise, and sometimes it's required. If somebody's out there dying 1,000 deaths, you just can't keep marching along and end up with 5 minutes of crowd silence. And so maybe, like one of the other commenters said, maybe there was a point in the promo where Punk laid out to give Owens an opening to kind of get a fiery spot in, so they could bring the crowd back to life. And it's a performance. So and nobody wants to go out there and just absolutely lay an egg. Like, it's not. I think their professional pride is enough that, yes, they can take some pot shots, and they have thick skin, and they both enjoy delivering these witty and sometimes cutting promos. But I don't know that it means that every word and every phrase is agreed upon ahead of time. I think that's it wouldn't make for very interesting television. That's for sure.
No, it wouldn't feel. They'd be good at it, but it wouldn't feel as natural as this did. When you say they both have thick skin and say bring it, I just think in the case of Punk, he needs to perform that he has thick skin. And he knows he has to. Like, he can't show in that context that any of this is getting to him. Or he thinks everything being said about him that we think should bother him doesn't, because he's a winner and those are just losers who are saying that about him. So, we all have stories we tell ourselves. And I think Punk has a story he tells himself, and that allows him as a thin-skinned person to stand there and not flip out, because he prepares himself with that shield of it's losers saying this and there's no merit to it, and he's talked himself into it. I think there's an element of that to some of these things. Other parts is just obviously certain things don't bother him. He's had immense success, and when you come out to 5, 10, 15, 30,000 people cheering you on a regular basis, I mean, that fuels you to survive, a 10-minute segment where someone gets a couple digs in on you. I mean, that is an existence that most people who, get berated by their boss or get torn apart by a coworker or something like that, they don't have that fuel, that refueling of thousands of people cheering and worshiping them and wearing t-shirts with their name on it. So that kind of helps you get through some of this stuff too. A couple more posts on Punk, then we will turn the page here. Crofton says, I'm so tired of the KO body shaming promos. He has such a unique look and can go in the ring. I would think that at this stage, any body comments would come from a heel like Gunther. I mean, in Punk's defense here, while it was more so last week than this week. This week is kind of shaming him. But last week it was sort of like, I paved the way with my Ryback Goldberg body for someone like you with that looking down at his gut. Like, you can say, well, that's a shot, but Punk could go, well, it was sort of self-deprecating in a way, because I'm like, my body type isn't perfect, yours isn't. I paved the way for someone like you. I was an indie hotshot with a reputation that the people in the major leagues resented and looked down upon, and all that was all true, in the way that people talked about Punk for sure, and KO to a degree when they got called up or signed by WWE. But elements of what Punk said were not body shaming, but we both know we don't fit a mold. That's how I took it last week. This week felt a little more body shaming.
Yeah, which I'm surprised they didn't, because Punk might have the best physique he's had in his entire life at 47 right now. As a guy, maybe there's some peptides or supplements at work here. Like if Owens really wanted to hit below the belt, I'm sure they could bring stuff like that up as well. So if you want to body shame me, like maybe you can explain how you got here from where you were. At
your
47.
trapezius muscles suddenly showed up in your late 40s.
Yeah. Not as easy as it looks, but I do think the Owens body shaming stuff does get a little bit tiresome, because we've seen him look essentially the same way throughout his entire career, and he's been kicking ass and having great matches in WWE. So it hasn't been a hindrance on his success, but I guess it's just meant to get the oohs and ahs from the crowd.
Kevin Owens is fast. He's agile. He does the cannonball flip. He takes great bumps. He doesn't blow up. He checks all the boxes that disqualify his body type being a criticism. But instead, as Crofton says, it's a unique look. But if you can go in the ring, that's off the table. Derek Mitchell says, you think Punk okayed KO saying his breast stinks? I don't know if he did or not, but that's not a big deal. I mean, that's just standard. Vinny says Cena cooked Rock on the mic. In retrospect, Rock looked so shook Cena could bring it on the mic against him. Yeah. I recommend Brian Gortz's book for behind the scenes stuff there. It was something. So Pyro Pizza, CM Punk is Phil turned to 11. I disagree. I think CM Punk is Phil turned down from 11 to like 8. I think I think it's sort of backwards. I think the on-air CM Punk character is actually a version of Phil that's believe it or not, toned down in these ways. Does that ring true to you, Jake?
I mean, I certainly don't think we've seen the worst impulses of CM Punk make their way on screen in terms of just the, because it was Owens in Ring of Honor, it was Nick Nemeth or was it? It was Ryan Nemeth in AEW. Yep. And we've heard stories from other people along similar lines where he just can't contain his anger sometimes. And he's been fairly controlled in that respect in character on television. So, I mean, certainly, the brawl out and everything else. Like we don't see the absolute worst of CM Punk. I think that does ring true.
Yeah. And Vinny says you can be right about something, but if you act like a jerk, then people don't like you. Okay. We talked about Cody a bit. And so we have Sammy's got his left arm or left wrist in a cast or immobilizer. And Nick Aldis says, well, you're hurt at SummerSlam. You got a chance. It's a choice you can make. Do you want to enter the ring? And if you beat Cody, then you can have the winner of Punk and KO. And Sammy didn't say yes or no. And the segment kind of pondered it after protesting the parameters. And then he comes out to the ring, and I'm like, after the actual last match of the night, I was like, oh, wait, we're going to get like a Cody promo, because the hype for SmackDown was, will Cody get his hands on Randy? So I'm like, well, they haven't done that yet. So with the 5 minutes or 4 minutes left in the show, they're going to sneak in a quick Cody promo and Randy angle. And then Sammy comes out. I'm like, oh my God, that's right. He's going to have a match, but it's not going to be a match because there's only 4 minutes left. And so the joke is Randy knew they were running out of TV time and decided to, just preempt the match because there wasn't enough time left. That was silly. I mean, honestly, that, in a way that should not have ended the show, Jay, because it was so preposterous that they were going to fit a world title contendership match between two former recent ex-champs, and Cody and Sammy into 4 minutes of remaining TV time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where overruns are nice, because at least you go, well, we roughly plan enough time, but we have room to run over. And obviously the local news for Fox affiliates do not want their news to start late. That's where they make their money as a local affiliate. So SmackDown really can't overrun much, if at all. I mean,
is that true on USA? I mean, I guess I don't know. Do they have an overrun on USA anymore?
Oh yeah, you're good. Yeah, I was in my Fox mode. You're right. But news came on my TV afterwards, but I think I just because I hit stop on the DVR. So I actually was lost in my Fox talking point back in the day when they couldn't go overrun because of the local Fox affiliates. But you're right. Whatever USA had on afterwards, they would do an overrun, and they have, but smaller ones because USA doesn't want to be way off schedule the rest of the night. But thanks for correcting me. But overruns are nice for that reason. And when you have a big match and it just happens to end right before the end of the show every week, I guess it's less of a big deal. That's just something you sort of, as a fan, look past. I think there's things that are correctable that break the immersion, but there's some things you just have to work with, and that's one of them. So anyway, more relevantly, what did you think of Cody and Randy, and obviously to a degree, Sammy, although I think Cody-Randy is the more... the more intense personal feud at this point. Sammy just sort of doing the Sammy thing in different circumstances week after week.
Yeah, I mean, it's more ammunition for Sammy to gripe. I think that's kind of become central to his character at this point, is thinking that there's some sort of overarching conspiracy to keep him from attaining his goals. I thought it was, on one sense, it was kind of a hotter ending to the show. It's been a while since we've had a show just that kind of ends with a brawl that's in progress and Cody continuing the attack. I'm assuming there was maybe like a dark match main event or something after.
I would hope so.
SmackDown, because that would have been an unsatisfying way for everybody in the live arena to be left. But I didn't think the brawl was like particularly great. Like it felt like they just did this very short walking brawl in like a half circle around one part of the arena, and then they had to go right to the show closing moment because they just didn't have enough time. It was, and so I think it definitely had the crowd's attention because people were hot for all the major moments of it. But I didn't think it was a particularly satisfying way to end SmackDown for the reasons that you laid out. Like it was obvious that something was up when they only had 4 minutes left in the show or 5 minutes left in the show, and they started doing the entrances for what would have been the main event, and then the actual brawl itself felt like it was abbreviated and they were rushing through it. So not my favorite moment of physicality, but it seems like this may lead to possibly a character evolution for Cody. So I hold out some hope that they're marching slowly in the right direction with him.
I was thinking that watching Cody interacting with Sammy backstage earlier in the night, that there seems to be an element of exasperation with Cody. Now, this plays into what you said earlier also, which is Cody's trying to come off as human, natural human emotions, and he's reacting to something in a way that comes across as he's exasperated and in a way that's going to lead to maybe a heel turn. But in reality, it's just Cody performing a frustrated person in a way that looks like it's laying the groundwork for a heel turn, but it's not. And that's a challenge when Cody stands in the ring and he is QB1 or he's on a quest to win a world title. He is as in his natural habitat, which is, I want to be the champion of this territory. And I'm a babyface and I live my life as a babyface. I carry myself with fans on and off camera as a babyface. I take it seriously like Bret Hart did back in the day, that I represent this sport. And if I'm the champion, it is a high responsibility. I think that's genuine with Cody. And that's when he comes across as genuine, but to some people kind of schmaltzy and, too precious. But that's authentically him. And I don't think I don't think the same things. Part of it's just what I know about him and from talking to him, interviewing him, hearing other people talk about him. I think that's who he is, and when he's most comfortable is when he's the lead babyface of the territory or on a quest to unseat the top heel. When you ask him to do other things, that's when you get into the zone of, okay, now he's having to overthink it. How do I come across as frustrated with Sammy? How do I come across as a heel? And that's when it can be a little awkward. But I seething at Sammy and saying, I've had enough of you. Let's do something about it. It's interesting to see Cody just kind of getting sick of Sammy, because that is understandable because Sammy's so relentless and kind of annoying. So you're sort of with Cody while also thinking, are they going somewhere with him?
Yeah, I mean, I do think you're right that there is a sincerity to Cody in the sense that he's doing what comes natural to him,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't get the impression that I think he's legitimately trying, but there's always that that piece of Cody where it's like he's like an alien who came to Earth and learned everything about how humans interact through soap operas and telenovelas, where it's just like everything is like turned up to 1,000 all the time, and it could come across as inhuman at various points. Where you're just like, is he aware of how this comes across? Like clearly he's not, and that's just kind of part of who he is, and you just have to learn.
I think he's aware people think that about him, and I think that makes more what you're saying too.
Yeah, I think so too. But you could tell like last week when he was talking about how he didn't need to be the good guy anymore, and he was openly throwing out, well, like what version of Cody is it going to take to beat this version of Randy Orton? And then he turns up the intensity backstage with his frustration with Sami Zayn, and you can see that they're trying new things with him in an attempt to see like, well, maybe we can, maybe not, maybe it's not a heel turn, maybe it's not explicitly spelled out that way, but we want to see if we can modify the presentation here enough to be interesting, because I think people have gotten a little bit sour on Cody the superhero who has been doing essentially the same act every week for bordering on 3.5 years now. So there's some promise there in the sense that, well, I like that they're trying new things. Can Cody adequately perform it in a way that is relatable to other humans? I don't know. Like that's always the risk with him, because I think he has a wheelhouse, and you described it a few minutes ago, and we'll see if stepping outside of that produces a result that works for him. But I thought kicking Randy Orton below the belt as a part of that final segment, like that's something that he might not have done 6 months ago, and so I think they are at least trying to make Cody a more interesting version of what we've been seeing on TV as the constantly QB1 oriented babyface.
I think what people didn't like about Cody as a babyface before is that if he had his back wedged into the base of ringside steps and a vicious, muscular athlete who screwed him over and has been, threatening him, held a chair and was about to bash him in the head with a chair while standing on a table over him, that Cody would not have resorted to a low kick. Like, that's what bugged people about Cody. It's like, you can't be that pure. Like, it's okay to fight fire with fire. And I think that's what the babyface psychology of Cody is, which is, I'm not going to be a pushover. I won't cheat first, but I'll cheat second and I'll cheat harder. That kind of approach. And I think that's what he was getting at last week. I think a lot of people are talking about, I don't have to be the damn good guy anymore. But I think the context of the line before it reframes it somewhat, which is, I'm not held to the standards of being the champion anymore, and I don't have to turn the other cheek. So what he was saying is, I'm not going to be a bad guy, but I had to be too good for my own good when I was a champion, because in Cody's mind, and I don't think most champions think this way, but in Cody's mind, growing up in the territories system, watching his dad as a babyface and being a student of the game, he believes that the babyface champion does have to conduct himself in a certain way, where fighting fire with fire is a last resort, and you should not lower yourself to their level. And he's saying, now that I'm not champion, Randy, I can lower myself to your level. I don't think that's turning heel. I don't think it's necessarily a hint of him going down a path of being a heel. What he's saying is, fans, if you thought I was too precious, too goody two-shoes before, you don't have to worry about that anymore, because I'm not champion. I don't represent this company, and I can take the low road. I'm not representing the company in the same way. And to me, I think that is, and I said this last, I think that's genuinely how Cody thinks and how he approaches his character right now. It's still, I mean, he's going to be a great heel if they go there. I mean, for sure. I'm just not convinced they're on the road to that right now, more than they're trying to show that he's a guy with an edge who is willing to meet somebody in the mud now.
That may be the case. I think he will be a great heel if they do go there. He wouldn't even have to try very hard. He could,
Yep.
A couple.
I worry he would try
changes.
too hard. Hard.
That's fair. He would lean into it too far. But
yeah.
I mean, there's what you were saying, I think is accurate, but I have no interest in seeing him go back to form if he were to regain the championship and put himself back on that pedestal of, I have to be, because that's a construct of his own mind, right? Like that's not what the fans demand of baby faces. You don't have to accept the lying, the cheating, the stealing of the heels and not return the favor. Like I think most people have adopted the idea, at least in pro wrestling, that turnabout is fair play. Like if you've been cheated, then returning the favor is not lowering yourself to their level. It's simply playing by the rules as they've been laid out in front of you. And I think most people would find that to be a completely relatable thing to do. But I guess the long term for Cody is, can there ever be a 3-year period of his career that replicates what he was able to do with a foil like Roman Reigns, who had been built for years ahead of his arrival? I don't think they have anybody on that level to play a foil to him, and so for him to think like, well, now that I'm not holding the title, I don't have to hold myself to this standard, but if I do win it again, then I guess I return to form. I think that's a mistake, because the company isn't structured in a way where that remains interesting after he regains the world championship, if that's the case.
I think part of what has been a struggle for Cody, or what has caused people to look at Cody as perceive that he's struggling, is that if you're QB1 and your best feud and your best moment was unseating, dethroning Roman Reigns, and Roman Reigns remains the top guy with or without the belt, it's hard to look like, there's just a feeling people get, which is, Cody finished his journey and he won the title, but he actually didn't get a seat at the throne. Like, he's not the top guy. And I know from internally in WWE, people are like, oh, Cody's a top star now. And people were like, I don't know. I don't think Roman's going to sit back and go, now that I don't have the title, I'm not going to be the top guy. And I don't know that people in powerful places in WWE were going to go, we're going to put Cody ahead of Roman. So when that sort of bleeds onto TV overtly and subtly, then you have Rock doing what Rock did and patronizing Cody on the first Raw, and you have John Cena patting Cody in the head, like, kid, someday you'll be something, when he's already something. One thing after another and then being matched against either other baby faces or popular heels, one after another. WWE didn't know how to book the heels that Cody needed to succeed, and Roman Reigns didn't really get out of the way even when he was gone. And then CM Punk shows up, and it's like there's a lot working against Cody just being the guy. And you see that on NFL teams sometimes. There's the quarterback, but there's the guy looking over his shoulder, or the assistant coach who's brought in by the GM, and he's the next coach, and the GM's just waiting for an excuse to fire the coach, so the guy he brought in as the assistant actually takes over as coach. That kind of thing, I just think has hindered Cody's chance to show what he could do if it really felt like it was truly about him. And he is the first night of 2-night PLE guy, and he's not the closeout night 2 guy. Let's see. 93 Octane 67 says Cody desperately needs a new character arc. There's only one way for him to get over, and that's to bleed and beg for sympathy. It's tired. There's a lot of people who think Cody needs something fresh. I have made the case Cody needs a clear playing field to do what he is doing, rather than a new act with the same blockades. It'll feel fresh, but if the blockades are still there to be the top guy, I think you'll still run into some of the issues that he's had. Derek says Cody is better as the lead babyface in the territory, like Junkyard Dog and Mid-South, Mr. Wrestling 2, and Georgia Championship Wrestling. Yeah, but if JYD was a top babyface, but there was the previous heel who was still portrayed as the top star, it wouldn't have been the JYD era. It's fine to have equals. The Von Erichs had the Freebirds. That worked. But Vern had Bockwinkel. But, there's examples where there's just a top heel and a top face, and, they both coexist. But I don't know. Does that sort of ring true, Jake, to a degree, that Cody, as we look at the last years, didn't really have that chance to just be the actual QB1 standing in the middle above everybody else aiming for him, but it was always just kind of other people were lingering above him or around him and kind of sabotaging him or undercutting him unintentionally.
I guess, is that a result of the company, just wanting others to be seen on the same level, or is Cody somewhat, responsible for some of that himself? Like, did he create space, with his performances that put him on a level where you could say, oh, he's clearly above Punk or above Roman in terms of, this
Yep.
is a guy who's in a class to himself. I don't know that
That's
he
the argument.
necessarily did that.
Yep. I notice in my framing of what I described, I sort of did said if the field was clear, Cody would have succeeded. There'd be fewer people going. He's not really a top guy. He's not succeeding. My argument isn't that he was the best choice, but that the reasons for people saying he needs to turn, he's stale, it's not working, is more a result of people pre-assessing who had power, that he wasn't that guy, which is what you're saying. Maybe he isn't that guy, or he wasn't so obviously the guy that everybody just knew they had to get out of the way. Also kind of think what you're getting at. But also just people in power, on air and off air, believed in other people more. We got to do something with Punk. This is amazing. He's back. We have to keep Roman hot. He's brought in this era and all these big TV deals. And Roman's bragged about that on air. He believes that. So I'm not saying it would have been better for business and the right choice to move everyone aside. And I don't think it was obvious Cody should have been, but Cody would have had more of a chance to prove himself and succeed had that decision been made and had the field been cleared. But it's for sure, there's merit to the argument that WWE did the right thing by not doing that. But let's agree at least that did cut away. It took away from Cody's opportunity to even show whether he could be that guy or not, with real world evidence.
Yeah, I think that's certainly the case. If you cut out the other top stars from the ensemble cast and you put all the attention on the other guy, certainly he has more of an opportunity to showcase himself. I guess when you have undercurrents of people who are in positions of authority trying to undermine you, then it's certainly, you're not going to be maximized. That's just the nature of it.
Yeah. All right, we'll move on to other topics after I read it. Just the last few chat comments here on Cody in particular. That's one thing we'll get to next. Powder Pete says they need to do a good story to turn Cody heel. He needs a good excuse for this catalyst. Standard Deviation said it's a shame they haven't gone all in on Cody as a unanimous top guy. Cody's role in stirring interest in someone winning the title off of Roman and igniting WWE's boom period is underappreciated. I agree with that. 93 Octane, Roman's influence still remains too large for Cody to eclipse. And that's what you're saying, Jake, is, well, that's up to Cody to a degree to make himself undeniable, unstoppable. And he might think he did or came close enough that he should have gotten the chance. And I'm kind of in that territory. But I get the idea of, no, things are too hot. We can't take a chance. Let's have ensemble. And that takes away Cody being able to be the center guy. Powder Pete says, I blame meddling. He didn't get a fair shake with an unmuddled title run. And that's the thing. We didn't need Cena undercutting him. We didn't need Rock undercutting him. And we didn't need a lack of development of heels like they're trying to create for Oba right now. They didn't build that. And Sting suffered the same fate after winning the WCW title in 1990. They just didn't have really good heels lined up. So when Sting wasn't wrestling Flair, it was like, ooh, I don't know if this can be the main event. There's not a backstory here that's compelling and going to sell tickets. So they had to keep going back to Flair and debated whether Sting was ready or had it. Durrell says Cody's been the best long-term babyface WWE's had in years, but WWE is a company who isn't ready to book a top long-term babyface. Well, we'll find out with Oba if that's true. Yeah. Okay, so Crofton said, I want to talk about Chelsea. It felt like a breakout babyface night for her character. Always one of the best mic workers, and she left the cartoon character behind tonight. So absolutely, that was a notable, memorable, and for a podcast like this, a good segment to talk about. She, Nicole just, said, I don't like doing this, but it's my job as GM. I got to strip you the title. You're not medically cleared. Chelsea made her case. I thought she strayed a little into a pity party. I was a little worried. Oh, woe's me. I'm just a victim. and all that. And she doesn't want to face the reality that you can't hold the title if you can't defend it in 30 days, although that's not really a thing. But in the context here, we're pretending it is. And so it came off a little, I thought it entered risky territory, but it came out of it like pretty quick. And the crowd, I think, was into her. And Aldis saying, okay, you got 30 days, wear a mask, do whatever you got to do, but I'm going to give you the full amount of time to prove that you can defend this title. I'm not going to strip it just because medics say you won't be ready within 30 days. I'm going to give you that chance. And then I did not expect Gunther to be the opposite force, the other voice, and it worked out great to get Matt Cardona out there. They did the right thing by having Gunther win Cardona despite a low blow when the ref's back was turned that Cardona used that almost got a win. It was a believable in their fault because it was a low blow, and you're like, well, maybe they're going to give Gunther an out and go, that doesn't count. But no, Cardona still lost. He should have. But I thought it was an entertaining segment, and I guess, Jake, to you, what'd you think of the segment, but was that a moment? I don't like to talk a lot about the Michael Hayes thing because it's just sort of the go-to line. I want to talk about Chelsea outside of that kind of WWE Unreal throwaway comment that I think is a little blown out of proportion in context. A little bit, not entirely. But is this a moment where now fans are going to look at her and go, I want that person in my women's title main events. Like, I don't want her to be a mid-card comedy figure as she painted herself in a little bit of a pity party that's where she always regresses to. Was this a segment that actually elevates her, perhaps permanently, or at least gives her a chance when she's healthy?
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting promo because it covered, narratively it made sense in context, but if her perception outside, as somebody who's been willing to do what she talked about, where she's always been willing to be the butt of the joke. She's always been willing to get thrown into dumpsters and take, big risks with her, her bumps and potentially, put herself at risk and things like that, where she was putting it in the context of, well, some may see this as the thing that got me to where I am because I have been, entertaining despite taking all these losses and always being the bridesmaid and never the bride. But I always had bigger dreams for myself. And, every time I've reached this sort of point in my life where I felt like I was on the precipice of something big, it was immediately accompanied by, some sort of tragedy, whether it was injury or, whatever the case may be. And so I thought it was a relatable way to say that, I've always been willing to do what it took to go the extra mile, to be, the person that supported not only my own career, but did the right thing for the place that I worked and just
it got a little meta.
It did. And I think it relied on you understanding the wider picture of, maybe the Unreal thing was part of that. Maybe it was just, the various pratfalls of her career with injuries and bad timing at different points in her life. But I think it worked because it made her relatable. And in Nick Aldis's presence there also made it relatable because they have some parallels, of how they always had, bigger dreams for themselves, but never quite broke through the final ceiling to get to that top level. And so I thought it was good. Was it a star-making performance? Well, like you said, it got a little maudlin at one point where it kind of felt like it was going to get into self-pity, but then I thought it turned the corner. Like I'm more willing to see Chelsea, at a point where it's like, well, maybe she can like reach that escape velocity that you need to sort of break out of the rut of being the mid-card comedy wrestler. What is it this one performance has sealed the deal? Well, probably not. Like, I think it's really going to depend on, if in 3 weeks or 4 weeks or whenever they decide that she's able to put on a mask and compete, what does it look like going forward? But I certainly think she did well enough here to where, maybe she'll get some additional consideration when it comes time to actually have that title defense.
I sort of feel obligated when a promo goes meta, it just permanently loses like 3 points on the 10 scale for me. I don't like it. I don't respect it. I think it's cheating, and I think it's also you're cheating in a way that's no longer effective. And that's where I thought it was a pity party. Because here's a quote for people who didn't see it or didn't remember. That's just my story, isn't it? It's just Chelsea Green, the comic relief. Okay. The perfect opponent for the rest of the other girls. What does that mean? You had a chance to win and you didn't. You know what I mean? Like the bell rang and may the best woman win. Or if you're under 18, may the best girl win. And
it felt like a lot of stuff you would have wrote for a reality show more than a scripted wrestling television product. Yeah.
And then she says, never the champion, never the QB1. When Sammy complains, he's supposed to be a heel who's looking at his own shortcomings as being a victim of unfairness, injustice, bad luck. It kind of started like luck. You know, every time something good and magical happens, it's followed by something devastating. That's not meta. That's just what we've watched. That's fine. But what are you going for when you go that I'm the perfect opponent for the rest of the girls? I mean, that's meta. Like I'm entertaining enough and I'll take bumps and I'll lose, but I'll talk myself back into being relevant. Like that doesn't belong in a promo in 2026 on TV. That's hack. That's derivative. It's played out. It's tired. Pick your derisive, descriptive words for it. And then never the champion, never QB1. Well, win your freaking matches. If you're a perfect opponent, if you had all these matches against those, whoever these opponents are that you're a perfect opponent for, in the storyline, in the way the show's presented, win. And then you get to be champion in QB1. So it took me a while to come back from that. You know, she said I skipped personal events at home to be available for WWE. My face went through birthday cakes. I had the entire world laugh at me as I was thrown in dumpsters. And that's fine to say I went through a lot of embarrassing stuff. But what I want wrestlers to not fear saying is, but then I got better at what happened once the bell rang. I trained harder. I studied harder. I got better through practice, through repetition, through changing my strategy, through being more disciplined and more focused. Like, say what a quarterback who was a number 1 draft pick and a bust for the first 4 years and then has a breakout 5th season says, which is, yeah, I got cocky. Or I didn't take it seriously. Or I went out partying. I was young and stupid. Whatever Chelsea's story is. And go, to me, the babyface pro, I know people enjoy this. And I did too, like I said, but this is this middle section that got me. And it was a perfect opportunity for her to say, people are mad at people who said I wasn't a main eventer. But I was losing my matches. And to start winning my matches, I had to start listening to why my critics thought I'd never be a main eventer. You can allude to Michael Hayes, but parlay it into storyline, parlay it into something that makes sense in the world that they create, that they want us to immerse ourselves and buy into, and go, you know why I started winning? Because I started taking myself more seriously. I was no longer thinking I should be the person whose face goes through the cake, or I needed to crack a joke to earn TV time. I'm still cracking jokes. I've still got a sense of humor about myself, but I'm a serious athlete now. And I just don't think that's hard, but wrestlers run from it because they think it's insulting the audience by pretending it's real. And it's insulting when they don't. It's insulting when they don't.
Yeah, there is that I'm in a reality show competition aspect of a lot of WWE television that's off-putting at times, because it does kind of suck you out of the idea that it's a fictional presentation of actual athletic competition. There is a lot of that meta stuff, and yeah, we could have talked about it with more with Owens and Punk too. Like I think there's a layer of that with that promo as well. It's become pretty invasive into the WWE product. I think Roman Reigns is particularly heavy with it nowadays too. Seth Rollins and Roman had a very meta feud that led to their SummerSlam match, and so I do think there's something to be learned from it, which is that, if you just remove this 30 seconds of the promo that felt like you were talking like you're a reality show contestant, and you pivot that more towards, like you said, I improved, I made it, I feel like I've gotten to the point where I don't need to humiliate myself to get ahead, that kind of thing. Then I think it does make you more relatable. But I do think maybe there is something to the idea that, they don't want the fans to feel like their intelligence is being insulted by claiming that it's not fake, which I think ends up having the opposite effect, because it just leads to confusion like we're talking about here.
Yeah. It's like intentionally showing the wires that Spider-Man is hanging from while he's doing his stunts. Like, we don't want people to think we're pretending that he can really fly. So we're going to make it obvious he's not actually able to scale buildings by showing the special effects. No, Let us lose ourselves. Let us buy in. And later she goes, until someone takes this off of me, this is mine. And that's good. I'd rather go until someone pins my shoulders down or makes me tap, this is mine. Or until someone beats me, it's mine. Take it off of me. Again, feels a little like I'm in the middle ground of, Nick, you in storyline have to take the belt from me, or management has to insist I give it up. It works, but given the baggage in the context of 2 minutes earlier, I still was like, oh, better, but what does she really mean by that? What is she really saying? So Derek Mitchell, a super chat. Thank you, Derek. Says, I thought Chelsea delivered a really passionate speech tonight. While it leaned a bit into the woe is me territory, her delivery was excellent. It's frustrating to see the double standard with Rhea. What's the double standard?
She didn't have to give up her title. They didn't do a presentation where she had
of course. Gotcha. Yeah. Yep. Makes sense. Then let's see. Sadler, and I think this is a stretch, Sadler, I'll just say, he goes, I took the perfect opponent for the girls line to mean people think she's a scrub champ. Like she's a perfect person to be champ that the other women can beat. But that in the context, Sadler, that's not what, I mean, you can interpret it that way if you want. It's I think generous, although I don't even think a great interpretation either, storyline wise. But what she was saying is I'm a good hand. I'm entertaining to lose to opponents. Kind of like maybe her husband feels too about things. Let's see. Standard Deviation said, I thought the logic suffered from her implying that enduring pies to the face is the path to receiving the world title. There's a way to take that and turn it into something that makes sense, which is her saying, I wasn't taking myself seriously. I was putting myself in situations to be, entertaining and do things that weren't helping me become champion. I wasn't focused. I had a unserious attitude, but I am serious about wanting to be a champion now. I got a taste of that at SummerSlam and in the lead up to it. Let's see. Sadler says Chelsea got a bit meta, but I think the fact that she wants to wrestle with a broken orbital bone is what endears her to fans. Yeah, that's what helped Cody. I mean, what he went through with Seth, that was a huge thing that buoyed Cody's reputation and really delayed some of the backlash against him or apathy towards him or people questioning him. Is just, okay, he's badass. Say what you will with the tattoo and the suits and the fastidious approach, but man, that guy's for real. I'll never forget what he put himself through to finish that match. Darrell says in her promo, she ran down her history in a way that she told the story and brought everyone in, caught them up, and told them about her goal now. Darrell says, plus they're not calling her the interim champ. Either she's a real full champ now. Either she is the real full champ now too. What do you make of the fact that they're not calling her interim? Is it changing their mind, or they just don't want to draw attention to it until it's convenient?
Maybe more of the latter. Maybe they don't know when Rhea Ripley is going to be back, and so they're just going to have to say that, yeah, she's the champion because Rhea. I mean, it sounds like, I guess we haven't really heard something specific about Rhea's injury, but it's some sort of meniscus surgery, which is 3-6 months, possibly even more if it's a more severe tear. So I guess we'll see. But I guess it came across to me like they were just going to ignore it, and then probably when Rhea comes back, she'll have an argument to get a title match, I guess.
I think what they should do if they genuinely were like, we don't know how long it's going to take Rhea to come back, so we're going to have an interim champ, but she could be back soon, which is how Wade Barrett framed it in his commentary going into SummerSlam. Then if you have more information now, relay it in storyline. It can be legit. I mean, I don't care if something's real or not, just as long as it's presented as real in the context of the show in a believable way that feels like it can exist in the real world that they create. Well, in that real world, they got an update on Rhea's injury. It's worse than we thought in the sense that she's going to be out at least 3 months, maybe 6. So now the interim title is the actual title, and Rhea has been officially stripped, and her title reign is officially over as of Chelsea winning at SummerSlam. Rhea was officially now stripped. It's not in abeyance or whatever, So I just think an update like that overtly would be good. And just be forthcoming on that. Don't leave people wondering what the heck's going on. Okay. I'm thinking what else. Oh, Baron Corbin, Carmelo. What do you make of Carmelo losing? Barrett said Corbin once again used debatable tactics. I don't know what debatable tactic is a great term for what he was implying, but what did Corbin do that was questionable? I mean, he knocked him off the top rope. He threw him around ringside, but I mean, that just sort of happens in a match. Did I miss something that was overtly heelish?
No, I don't know if there was supposed to be something more to that. It looked like he knocked Carmelo off the top rope and Carmelo landed short of the
Yeah.
barricade. Maybe he
Yeah.
was supposed to hit that, and that's
Tessitore said he
it.
did, but he
Yeah,
didn't.
like, oh, he
Yeah.
hit his chin or
Yeah.
something on the way
Yeah.
down, but he didn't
Yeah.
get close. So I don't know if there was supposed to be something more to that finish that ended up getting an audible called, and they just kind of stuck with the original idea behind the commentary. But he
Yeah.
lost clean from a visual perspective.
Yeah. Are you buying the Corbin push? Is it working for you? Is he looking credible? I mean, do you think he and Big Bill are around just to eventually be fed to Oba, and that's why they're back? Because they're tall, and I said they have an Obafemi problem, and they're solving it by bringing tall guys back? Or is there something else going on here, and Corbin won't get anywhere near Oba as a main event opponent, and he's just there to be a big heel against Trick and Baron and whoever?
I'm assuming they're just using him in a way where they think, well, we can eventually build him up to the point where somebody beating him is going to be or going to feel like a big deal. And I don't know that he has the instant credibility that they might have thought he would, being a legacy star who's making a return to the company. Like I don't see him getting these huge reactions, but his heel tactics have gotten some boos from the live crowd, which is better than we've seen from a lot of heels recently. And so I'm not going to say it's not working, but it is kind of jarring to see him come back and seemingly, beat people like Trick Williams and Carmelo Hayes without a ton of difficulty. Like it's not like he's taken egregious shortcuts. He's just outsmarted them in most of these occasions.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, what we have with Corbin is, and this is, I didn't have room in my headline with the font I use, but has WWE abandoned the face heel construct? But the sub headline talks about the main event scene, leaves fans with repeated whiplash over whom to cheer. And the article gets into it. The formula, there's evidence of the heel face formula under the main event scene working. People love Trick, and they want to see Trick beat Baron Corbin. They love Otis. They want to see him beat up Austin Theory and Maxine, rub it in their face. Being too overtly touchy-feely, public displays of affection, and being arrogant and mean to Otis. Like, the formula still clearly works. The evidence is there on the mid card, and they're not elevating it. And frankly, it's there with Corbin. People, I'm not saying it's like selling tickets, but the crowds are willing to react to a face heel dynamic. They like Carmelo Hayes. They like Trick Williams. They don't like Baron Corbin, understandably so. I don't love Hayes, and I like, I call for brave booking, like book clean finishes, but you don't want the clean finish to be the smaller guy who can work who had some momentum, and now he's being defined down a bit, and you just sort of create a little excuse. Well, Corbin used debatable tactics, and what, you're not supposed to shove someone off the top rope now? I mean, that's fair game.
Yeah, it didn't come across as outwardly even heelish. Like we've seen baby faces do that to other wrestlers before. And so I guess maybe the idea here is to work them into a triple threat where, you got two guys gunning after Corbin. And I think there could be some interest there. The U.S. title division used to be fairly lively, after, before Trick won it. And I guess, going back into 2025 and they kind of focus on, they had some, Sami Zayn dragging off the Carmelo Hayes. They had some interesting people, in and around that championship, and hopefully Corbin establishing himself as a heel allows them to send a few people after him, because I think that could bring that division back up to where it was doing something a bit more interesting. I think and Yachty was back on this show, but I think having Trick and Yachty doing their act over the past, I guess 4 months with that U.S. title had kind of brought it back down to a point where it was kind of losing a little bit of buzz at that point, because it wasn't the work rate title like it was at one point on the show.
Didn't help that Pat McAfee said WWE shit now, and in that promo was disparaging these 20-minute vanilla midgets having work rate match, star rating match, whatever his silly thing was. It did kind of signal to fans, these guys are mid-card spot monkeys. Don't take them seriously, and nobody watches them. I mean, it didn't destroy it, but it didn't destroy the joy that the fans had felt and could still feel in really good competitive matches with, smaller guys fighting over a secondary title with really good competitive matches. People, I think, miss that era of SmackDown right now from earlier this year and last year. But that was a revealing comment. And, I don't know if Pat just, wrote that on his own and showed up and read it and no one knew, or if a couple powerful people in higher places felt that way and they used him as the vessel to express it and to let people know it's not going to be that way anymore. But, I mean, that's kind of a turning point in a lot of what people look at as a good era of WWE versus where it started to fall apart is McAfee having that platform and saying the things that he said that made it seem like, some powerful people didn't like what was happening and you as a fan did. And now you feel like they're not going to aim the product at you anymore. If you like that stuff. Speaking of heel and face dynamic, a super chat from Nima Pazar says Anderson Silva and Chael Sonnen was a classic face heel matchup. Yep. Absolutely. Chael Sonnen got that too, kind of obnoxiously, performatively, cartoonishly too, but it kind of worked in the UFC realm. Sometimes it's hard to pull off.
He and Punk are somewhat similar in that way, where it's like, well, you're not wrong, but you are an asshole, so that's that makes you a heel.
Yes, exactly. Crofton, by the way, as far as just going back to KO and Punk in that realm of face tearing each other apart, Crofton said, I get Wade's key point about faces tearing into each other, which generally makes sense, but man, I had goosebumps throughout Punk and KO's promo. I get it, but I didn't get goosebumps, but I mean, I did too. It was really cool seeing those two against each other, but step back and assess, are you the audience? And could they have given you goosebumps by staying within the lines of the playing field of WWE's world? And yeah, there's so much to work with about, I want to prove I'm better than you right now. I've always been better than you. Oh, you think you have, huh? Well, what about this that happened in my time in WWE? Well, you were gone. Well, what happened before I got here? And I don't know. I mean, I thought the strength is more there. But even so, as I talk about, what I like more, it's still two baby faces just using their weapons against each other, and it's just too much of that. But I have circled back to a point that I sufficiently made earlier. Okay. Charlotte and Bliss. Charlotte hugs Bliss. Thanks for kicking Michin and B-Fab's butt last Friday. And then they talk about Paxley. And then we have Paxley in a black walled room with photos of Charlotte. And Charlotte walks in there and kind of nervously says, groovy, I think was what she said, or something. What do you make of this as a follow-up to Paxley's debut last week?
I was kind of worried, last week that they were going to have her play this like childlike, I guess manic pixie type character that they had her doing in NXT, and it appears that is the case. I mean, I hope they have a different take on this here. We've seen the obsessed stalker character before in WWE on numerous occasions, and I guess I hope they have something new or interesting in mind for Tatum. It's interesting that she had I think they had like a curtained off, very small space for them all to stand in, like as a part of a larger room. And I think it had photos of both Bliss and Charlotte. Like she's obsessed with the two of them and their relationship. Mm-hmm. And so I guess she'll end up being, the wedge between them at this point. Mm-hmm. That's kind of where I guess they're going with it. But my biggest issue with Tatum in NXT was that she was often infantilized to the point where her character was just unrelatable to me. Yeah. And I hope they don't repeat that mistake on the main roster, because I think, even though I had quite a few issues with her presentation in NXT, she can go. Like, she's a very talented in-ring worker. And I think she could be a valuable addition to the roster. They just have to be careful not to make her character a turnoff for adults, honestly.
How about Tiffany and JC Jane in their U.S. title match? Anything stand out there?
I thought the match was kind of rough. I like the win for JC because I'm generally a fan of hers, and I don't know necessarily where the blame lies, but there was just a lot of aspects to that match that just looked a little bit off from an execution standpoint. They had the prettiest moonsault ever, where JC was supposed to get her knees up, but it didn't look like she actually did. And then there was JC kicking out of the swanton where it looked kind of odd, like she kicked out too early. And so, yeah, there's just some weird execution errors there, but hopefully with some additional time and some chemistry, they'll get a bit better. But I haven't been impressed with Tiffany as a babyface, generally speaking. And I don't, maybe this is an opportunity for her to turn heel, splitting away from Chelsea if she blames her for the loss. And so I think that would be a net positive for the brand if that was the case.
Yeah, there was a running knee strike by Tiffany that just didn't even come close to. So,
no.
How about the three-way tag title match? Priest Truth, War Raiders, MFTs. MFTs win the WWE tag team titles. I'd love to lead a podcast, a post show with tag team titles changing hands because it's a big deal. The MFTs maybe will pull the tag belts out of the silly. I mean, it's fine mid-card stuff, but the tag champs, I'd rather the tag titles be against a prestigious team with some credibility, with some just credibility as a top act of their era. I mean, that's what I grew up with, and so many people look back fondly at when tag teams were main event equivalents or protected secondary acts. Rock and Roll Express, Midnight Express, Freebirds, Von Erichs. The Road Warriors were, centerpiece top acts. AWA built around them after Hogan jumped to the WWF. Then Edge and Christian, the Dudleys, and I mean, whatever. The Demolition Era and Heart Foundation and British Bulldogs and Rougeos. You absolutely can have, and heck, the Briscoes were arguably the top tag team of their generation. Just didn't wrestle in front of huge crowds, but consistently, other than some tag team runs with Jay, some singles top runs with Jay. On top, they were just a amazing thing. And WWE it's just whatever sort of left over on the side of the plate. They'll just give some token TV time to. Are Tama and Tala with Haku going to give a sinister edge and credibility to the tag division again, or is it way too soon to declare that?
I think it's a bit premature, but I am happy that we don't have the titles on two singles wrestlers who had questionable on-screen chemistry. Maybe it worked for a time, but it certainly hasn't felt that way for a bit. I do think adding Haku and trying to add a bit of credibility to the act is a positive development. I just don't like who are their challengers at this point. Like it's like they've won the titles. Okay, so now we have to find some babyface teams to chase after them, and it seems like it's in pretty limited supply, particularly on the SmackDown side. And so I think that the issue, and this is an issue that spreads to multiple divisions, is like there's really no pipeline of challengers for existing champions to keep these reigns, especially if you want them to be longer reigns, interesting. And I think that's something they have to work on in general. But the tag division is oftentimes, like you said, the last priority when it comes to keeping television relevant and interesting.
Is that justified? Is it a lost opportunity? Is it circumstantial? You just do what you can with what you got, but if you're a real star, you'd be a singles wrestler. Like what does lead to that sort of being a recurring? I mean, AEW is supposed to be the company that brought tag team wrestling back, with the Young Bucks as EVPs, and it's been hit or miss even with them.
Yeah, there's probably some politics involved, maybe some self-sabotage involved with the Young Bucks not being, centerpiece stars in AEW. But with WWE, it often seems like they, the second they think that somebody, is genuinely marketable and that they have a future as a potential headline star, it's like, well, we don't want you in the tag division anymore. It's almost like they get promoted to being a singles wrestler. And we haven't really had a team come along in a while that you could say like, well, this is a generational, level of talent where it's like, oh, we can base a show around, these two guys who are committed to each other. We just don't have those kinds of relationships among tag team wrestlers in WWE. I mean, you have the War Raiders and you have the MFTs now, and you have the Street Profits, but they usually lose out in favor of the latest two singles wrestlers that have been jammed together for some other reason that's become a storyline priority. And it's a shame, but it's just been the nature of WWE for a long time now, at least a decade or more.
And I like if you were to prioritize the tag team division, you would have tag team specialists who are always tag team wrestlers, and the fact that they focus on that, they have teamwork, there's chemistry, and it's what they focus on. They are formidable and at their best equals to the 2 single stars who decide to tag together, but they find out that it's a different sport. It's a different skill set to be great at tag team wrestling, and that 2 great singles wrestlers can compete, but it doesn't mean you're necessarily better. And if I'm a booker, that's a story I'd tell. I have my perennial tag team guys, but I keep the division fresh by having, Big Show talking about Jericho. You have tag teams of 2 singles wrestlers who come together and are a tag team for a little while, and it creates new chemistry. But you want that established baseline Midnight Express-esque team also, or the Dax and Cash, that kind of thing.
And we heard from, was it Nakamura last week that he has some sort of mystery partner coming in to there it is, to take down the MFTs, and I don't know who that's going to be. People have thrown around like Hiromu Takahashi,
former Evil,
and former Evil, but I guess we don't know for sure until they show up on television. But I mean, I'm not expecting some tag team renaissance to kick off, but it's the most attention that we've had on the tag division, at least in terms of having 2 teams that were dedicated to being teams come together and have a feud. So I guess there's some promise there.
Yeah. 2 closing comments here in the chat. Rude Dog says Motor City Machine Guns would have been great opponents for the MFTs, but TKO cheaped out and didn't want to re-sign them, and now there's no tag teams. Standard Deviation said, has the evolution of singles wrestling taken away some of the distinctiveness of tag wrestling due to how much singles matches have sped up and become more athletic and less of a spectacle of big men? I think there's something to that. I mean, tag teams, not always, but there was an element of, this is a more athletic style because the guys are taken in and out. You don't get winded. There was, you're here because you're athletic, not because you're powerful. I don't know. I mean, there was a little bit of that baked into some tag divisions, but I mean, they ended up getting Ricky Morton over as a babyface opponent to Ric Flair, during the Great American Bash tours of stadiums in the late 80s, mid 80s. And I mean, you can, but I mean, people didn't think Dennis Condrey was going to be a top opponent for Dusty Rhodes on a one-on-one match, but in a tag team, with Cornette managing him, it worked. So, like Sadler says, I've always hated when 2 singles wrestlers beat a real tag team. I think you can tell that story, but it shouldn't just seem like, well, that anytime they want two top singles wrestlers can beat a tag team. I think you want to have a mix. You want to not have that always be the case. In fact, half the time at most, you still want to protect tag team specialists. Jake, you were going to say something? I stepped on that.
Oh, no, I guess I was going to say that I think one of the big issues with the tag division is that we really haven't had successful personalities. Like people bring up the machine guns, and it's like I like the machine guns. I think they're perfectly capable, but they're like indistinguishable from wallpaper when it comes from a personality standpoint. I think in order to succeed and get the level of attention that's required to be successful in WWE, you have to have that level of personality that's attention grabbing, and you have to have a successful promo style, and you have to actually grab the audience. Where I think a lot of the tag team specialists that have come through WWE in the last several years even have kind of failed to do that. And so I hope they find that act that reinvigorates creatives, that grabs their attention and gets them interested in tag team wrestling again. But we just haven't had that feud or that sort of magic chemistry come along in a while, at least from my perspective anyway.
Yeah. Anything else from the show you want to bring up? Finn Balor, or I don't know, anything else? Any straight comments from topics we've covered already?
I guess just some general praise of Gunther. I thought he was fantastic in that opening promo. I think I can't think of anybody else in the company who seems to have a better handle on who they are and what their character is, and is really consistent about delivering. If you're looking at somebody to emulate as a heel, I think you're not going to find anybody better than Gunther at the moment. He gets under the crowd's skin. He gets under the people's skin in the ring. He's got the talent and the confidence to back up his words. He's just the kind of heel that you want to have on your roster. So that was all I wanted to add there.
the bump he took in the body language when Cardona knocked him out of the ring, and he's just like regrouping and at ringside, like, what just happened? It's like he does that. He puts the babyface over, but then he just regains his main event sinister heel credibility by, putting in a dominating enough performance and winning decisively. All right, very good. Thanks, everybody in the chat, for joining us, especially the Super Chats. Appreciate those. Derek Mitchell, king of Super Chats as usual. Jake, thanks so much. Everyone check out Jake's work at prowrestling.net. Get details on the membership tier at pwmembership.net. And subscribe for free to the PW Boom podcast, wherever you listen to this podcast. If you haven't subscribed to that yet, it's a good thing to add to your weekly schedule. Jake, we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Wade. Take care.
You bet. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We'll talk to you next time. Have a good weekend.